Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carrie Abrams, the Dean of Duke Law School, and it is wonderful to see so many of you here today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that today's program will include discussion of potentially distressing content, including gun violence and tragic murder. We are here today to honor U.S. District Judge Esther Salas with the 2024 Raphael Lemkin Rule of Law Guardian Medal, which recognizes individuals who work to safeguard the rule of law. Judge Salas has served as a U.S. District Court judge for the District of New Jersey since her confirmation in 2011. She previously served as a magistrate judge in the District of New Jersey from 2006 to 2011. She earned her undergraduate and law degrees from Rutgers University, and after a clerkship in the New Jersey Superior Court, she practiced law, first in private practice and then as an assistant federal public defender for the District of New Jersey. She has been active in numerous bar organizations and committees, including the Hispanic Bar Association and Foundation of New Jersey. Judge Salas's career and life changed forever on July 19th, 2020, when a former litigant from her courtroom appeared at her home dressed as a delivery person and shot and killed her 20-year-old son, Daniel Androl. The assailant also shot and severely injured Judge Salas's husband, Mark Androl, who's with us here today, before fleeing the scene and killing himself. The assailant was later found to have described himself as an anti-feminist and had written about Judge Salas and other judges in racist and sexist terms. He had intended to kill Judge Salas. In the months following the horrific attack, Judge Salas and her husband determined that Daniel's death would not be in vain, and they would do everything they could to prevent similar tragedies for other families. For the past 4 years, they have worked tirelessly with state and federal legislators to pass laws to protect judges. In November 2020, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed a bill known as Daniel's Law, and in December 2021, President Biden signed the Daniel Androl Judicial Security and Privacy Act of 2021. These laws prohibit the distribution of personal information, including home addresses and phone numbers, for judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement personnel, and advance other safety measures for judges and courts. Many other states have passed or are now considering similar legislation. Lobbying legislators is not normally what judges do, and it is not easy to get a bill passed. This was a heroic undertaking that required Judge Salas and many judges who supported her, including Judge Robin Rosenberg, who is with us here today, to fight through complicated and slow political machinery in order to make these bills into law. They did so in the hope that other judges and their families would not have to suffer in the way that Judge Salas and her husband have. I am in awe of Judge Salas's bravery in a time of horrific tragedy, her perseverance in the face of political obstacles, and her willingness to share her story, to educate others about the dangers that judges face. It is truly a privilege to honor her today with the Lemkin Medal. Now I will briefly introduce our other speakers before we proceed with the program. First, you will hear from Judge Paul W. Grimm, who will present the Lemkin Medal to Judge Salas. Judge Grimm is a retired federal judge and the David F. Levy Professor of the Practice of Law and Director of the Bolch Judicial Institute. He joined Duke Law in 2023 after 25 years collectively of service as a magistrate judge, a chief magistrate judge, and then a district judge in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland. He received his Master of Judicial Studies degree from Duke Law School in 2016. Following the presentation of the medal, Judge Robin Rosenberg of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida will lead today's discussion with Judge Salas. Judge Rosenberg earned both her master's degree and her JD from Duke, and has a distinguished career in public service and private practice before she was elected to serve as a judge in Florida's 15th Judicial Circuit in 2007. In 2014, she was nominated and unanimously confirmed to her seat on the district court. Judge Rosenberg co-created and leads the Civil Discourse and Difficult Decisions educational program, which many of you have participated here at Duke Law School. She currently serves as chair of the Judicial Conference Advisory Committee on Civil Rules. Thank you for joining us today, Judge Rosenberg. As a final note, we are recording today's program and will make it available later this week on the Duke Law and Bolz Judicial Institute websites. Thank you, and now I will turn over the proceedings to Judge Grimm.
Thank you so much, Dean Abrams. Every year, the Bolz Judicial Institute at Duke Law School awards the Lemkin Rule of Law Guardian Medal to an individual that has taken steps to protect and advance the rule of law. Well, what do we mean by that? We're talking about lawyers who fight for justice for their clients, judges who follow the law when doing so is unpopular and can even be dangerous, and men and women who ensure that all people are treated with fairness and dignity. These are what we talk about as the guardians of law. They make sure that our democracy lives up to its purpose and that human rights are protected. The medal is named for Raphael Lemkin, a lawyer and scholar who came from Poland, escaped the war, and arrived at the United States as a refugee following World War II. Now, an interesting note is that he actually served on the faculty of Duke Law School from 1941 to 1942, which makes why it's particularly appropriate to honor him with the name of this Guardian Medal. Professor Lemkin devoted his entire life and career to the study of war crimes, and he advocated for the use of criminal law to defend peace and prosecute crimes against humanity. He is the one credited with coining the phrase genocide and for creating a framework for holding nations and individuals accountable for acts of genocide. In 1948, he helped to secure passage of the Genocide Convention at the United Nations, obligating member states to bring crimes of genocide to trial. The past recipients of the Lemkin Medal include Benjamin B. Ferencz, who at the time was the award was given him in 2020, was one of the last surviving Nuremberg war crimes prosecutors. Our own Duke Law professor, Jim Coleman, a nationally recognized leader for pursuing justice for the wrongfully convicted and advocating for death penalty reform. And last year, Professor Harold Koh, for his decades-long work to strengthen rules of law internationally at the State Department as an academic and as an attorney. But this year feels very special to us because we are awarding the Lemkin Rule of Law Guardian Medal to U.S. District Judge Esther Salas in recognition of her efforts, which were nothing short of heroic, to strengthen the laws to protect judges, their physical safety of themselves and their families. Judge Salas, we recognize for helping us all understand that these threats against judges, whether physical or just attacking them unjustifiably for the work that they do in the cases assigned to them, ultimately diminishes public faith in the judiciary, degrades judicial independence, and creates a culture of intimidation and fear that threatens and undermines the rule of law. After today's program, the Bolz Judicial Institute is hosting a conference titled Defending the Judiciary, which aims to mobilize the legal profession to defend judges from this growing wave of attacks. Our conference and so much of the work that is being done in this area was inspired by you, Judge Salas, and for that, we thank you for these extraordinary efforts. All judges and lawyers owe you a debt of gratitude for your work in the face of unimaginable loss If you could please come up to the podium, it will be my great pleasure to award you the 2024 Rule of Law Guardian Medal. Just a housekeeping note before I turn it over to Judge Rosenberg and Judge Salas. If you are attending the Defending the Judiciary Conference, my colleague Melinda Vaughn will be outside the door when this is over, and will show you the way to go immediately to the J.B. Duke, which is just next door, where our conference will begin promptly at 2 p.m. And now, Judge Rosenberg, Judge Salas, I turn it over to you.
Okay, well, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce the amazing Esther Salas. I cannot tell you how lucky you are to be in the same room and in her presence. I am honored to call you a friend and a colleague. Esther, you're being honored today for your work to pass the Daniel Anderl Judicial Security and Privacy Act, which provides some protections for judges' physical safety and is named for your heroic son, Danny. Can you tell us about Danny, what happened to him and what happened to your family on that fateful day on July 19th, 2020?
So we heard from Dean Abrams a lot of it, and so what I'd like to do, Robin, with your permission, is just talk a little bit about a book that I read. And actually, the author was here 2 nights ago, and it's David Brooks, and he wrote a great book called Second Mountain. And to put things in context, I want to talk about my mountains and talk about how I got knocked off. So I started my climb, and he describes the first mountain climb, probably what you're all on, many of the students in this room right now. And it's that you know, what you envision being the top, where you want to get in your life. And that's that first mountain you're climbing. And I describe it as I describe it rather as a me climb or an I climb. You know, it's what I want to do in my life. What is in it for me? I want to get to the top. And that climb is can be a very aggressive climb. It can be one that you look at that top of that mountain and you say, you know, you're quick to take risks, slow to ask for help, and you're unrelenting. And, you know, people get to the top of that mountain. I was on that climb. My husband, Mark, was here. I met him in law school. We fell, madly in love, and we immediately wanted to have a family. And I tried to have a family, and I had 4 miscarriages, 3 before Danny and 1 after. So, getting to that part of the mountain was tough for us, but we eventually were graced with Daniel's appearance on July 13, 2000. And I was, I had accomplished that ledge, and I within striking distance, I saw that pinnacle and with Mark and Danny by my side, I was able to become the first United States magistrate judge, male or female, in our district, the District of New Jersey, to hold the position of a U.S. magistrate judge. And I was, that was good enough for me. I was really happy right there, but then, again, life and the climb, I kept climbing, and President Obama appointed me in 2011 as a U.S. district judge. Now, a lot of people get to the top of that mountain, and some people look around and they say, was it worth it? All the sacrifice, all the time lost with my family. That wasn't me. I loved the top of my mountain. I was so happy. I loved my job. I loved my son. I loved my husband. And I was just doing the best job and living the best life I could possibly live. And as Dean Abrams said, on July 19, 2020, at 5 o'clock after a weekend celebration, because Daniel had just turned 20 years old, and it was COVID, and he convinced Mark and me that we should have a party and that he would socially distance from his friends. But we got a tent and we separated everybody by 6 feet, and that didn't last long, but we tried. And Daniel was going to the Catholic University of America, so all of his friends were coming over that Friday night. And we got mattresses, and the guys were downstairs and the two girls were upstairs with me, because I'm still a very Cuban kind of gal. So the two girls were upstairs, and Daniel, we had a phenomenal time. What we didn't know is that a man was stalking me. And he was outside my house. And we know from FBI debriefings now and cell phone records that he was outside our house, and he watched Danny's friends come in, all one at a time. And then a lot of the friends left the next day, and I made Daniel some breakfast, but Mark and I were trying our best to give him his privacy. So I took our two dogs, and I decided to walk down to a grassy area. And as I was walking down to the area, I noticed that a car was kind of out of place. And I turned and looked at the driver, and the driver looked at me, and for a moment we locked eyes. And then he turned away. I would later find out that was my son's murderer. He stayed on the block. I walked the dogs, I came back, I said goodbye to Danny's friends. They went off to the beach. This man watched as I loaded beach chairs and an umbrella and coolers. I went to ShopRite, as a good mom, Cuban mom must do, to make Daniel his favorite dinner that night for him and his friends that remained. And I say, Robin, I do a lot of thinking about it and talking about it, and I realized that I didn't know it. And I say it, and I always, I do get emotional. I was able to make my son his last meal. And to know that he had his last meal with me and his dad and his friends. It was such, it's a blessing. And Saturday night came and went, and the next day, there's so much in between, but I know we're short on time. I'll just say that Dad and I went to church. Daniel was an usher. We left him home resting. And when we got back in the afternoon, Mark was getting antsy about wanting to clean up the mess. And finally, Daniel came down, and we were in the basement, and we were just talking. And Daniel was telling me all, his hopes and dreams, really talking about his concern for his friends. Two of them were fighting. And Mark came down the stairs, and, Mark has always and will always be Daniel's, best friend, but I was Daniel's, consigliere, his, confidant. And so he said, hey, Dad, Mom and I are talking. And at that point, Mark grabbed the water and ran, went back upstairs. And Daniel was swinging a wiffle ball bat. And I remember him going, keep talking to me, Mom. I love talking to you. And at that very moment, if it was a movie, the director would say, cue the doorbell, because the doorbell rang. And my son's face changed from calm and serene to alarmed and concerned. And he said, who is that? And I said, and before I could say, don't bother, Dad's up there, he just bolted up those stairs to meet his fate. He took one gunshot wound to the chest, fell back with his arms in a cross position, and then the gunman turned the gun on Mark and started shooting Mark. And Mark was trying to get at him, so all his bullet wounds are indicative of someone kind of zigzagging. But the man left, and all I could hear from downstairs were like mini bombs. And I remember screaming, what is happening? And I ran up the stairs, and when I made the left, I saw what no mother should see. My son perpendicular to the door, and my husband crawling on the porch, trying to get the license plate of the man that just rocked our world. And I always quote, and for the more seasoned, I like to call us the more seasoned women in the audience, we might remember the movie Steel Magnolias and Sally Field's, moment where she loses her daughter and she's in the cemetery. And I still cry, I say it all the time, but I think it's important to again, see life the way you have to see it. And I remember Mark crawled back and we were flanking Danny. And I just say that we were there when that beautiful creature came into this world. And we were there when he left. Can't ask for anything more.
It's remarkable what you and Mark have been through. It's remarkable what Danny did to save you and Mark by the way you've described, and I know you know that he was there to protect you and to protect Mark.
Yeah.
But maybe little did he know that he really was protecting the entire judiciary. And that leads me to sort of the next steps, which were somewhere in that moment of shock, of grief, of terror, of loss. You and Mark found the strength to go on, but not just to go on, but to take on this heroic effort of moving the legislature in Washington in less than 2 years to pass a path-breaking piece of legislation to ensure that I and our colleagues here today and state judges as well that you're working on, what was that process like, and how did you find the strength and the will and the determination to go on? How did you find the strength to turn the grief into such a positive force for all of us?
Well, I want to talk about the David Brooks book because he talks about people that have been knocked from the mountain, and I was knocked in a crushing way into a valley of despair. And I am not going to sugarcoat it. I did not want to live at the moment that those doctors came in to that cold and sterile hospital waiting room to tell me my Daniel didn't make it. And I'm glad I had a crisis nurse there because, she was needed. And Mark was still fighting for his life in the ICU. I often tell people, at one point I was getting good and angry in the waiting room before anyone was telling me what was going on. And I remember I got angry and I said, I need to know if I am planning one funeral or two. I was in that valley. And when I found out Daniel didn't make it, I went into it. I tell a lot of people that I truly believe that we have all lights inside of us. And I felt the light switch turn off. And I was in the dark. And I was in the dark for days as they would roll me up to see my husband in the ICU. I was really just in a catatonic state. And I remember the day I woke up. It was the Wednesday after the murder. And the doctors came in to tell me Mark wasn't doing great. And I am a very spiritual person. When I say spiritual, I'm not speaking about religion. I'm talking about a state of being. And I do believe that a force greater than me touched me. And I woke up and I felt the light switch come back on. And the light was flickering. Not bright, but it was flickering. And the doctors came in, and I remember asking for a pen and a piece of, pad and a pen. And I turned to the doctor and I said, and your name is? And that was the start of my second climb. My climb out of the valley of despair, onto the next mountain. And that next mountain is a different mountain. Mr. Brooks describes it again, that me climb is that first one, the we climb is the second climb. And it's a different climb. It's a more contemplative climb. It's a climb, I saw some of the students, Henry's here, he was with me this morning. And I really do talk about this climb now being a climb that I look at the top of that mountain, and if it looks really hazardous and steep, I don't need to take that road. I can take another road. I can find an alternate route. If I feel I'm kind of tired, I can sit at the edge of a cliff and I can let my feet dangle a little and watch the sunrise. If I feel like I need help, I can have friends like you and Beth Bloom that are here, to accompany me on this climb, right? And we did. We were walking together, climbing together. And at the end of the day, my message really about everything that we have been through, because it's a we climb, has been it's not the pace that we're traveling, it's the purpose. And for me, it was a greater purpose. It was a purpose that Mark and I now sort of both felt the need to help judicial officers. And that's where the YouTube video came. And And that's where a lot of sort of life started unfolding. And I knew that I was on this climb, and it was a far different climb, and there was so much more at stake. So where it comes from, I think Daniel, God are always first, thing I think about and last thing I think about at night. And I think my mother, who is an incredible woman, who is no longer here, but is very much here for me, in showing me how to weather adversity, and really how to never give up, despite the knocks that life will throw you. And I know that the climb up isn't over. I don't know. I say to everybody all the time, I don't know where we're headed. I certainly don't know what it will look like what it will look like when we get there, if we ever get there, but we'll be together. And we'll have a purpose. And we continue to advocate for democracy and the rule of law. And we won't stop.
And that's really what this journey has turned into. It seems that at the core, protecting the security of our judiciary, whether it be the physical security or the confidence in the judiciary, is at great risk today. And in navigating this journey, you've had to come up against forces that we as judges usually don't encounter. We're kind of cloistered in our courtrooms. We're sort of in control of our domain. It's predictable. We can control, to some extent, the outcome. But to take on the U.S. Congress and to get a piece of legislation passed is difficult by any standards, even those who are paid and are professional lobbyists. But as a novice, as somebody, in fact, as a judge who, is taught to stay away from politics, to keep your hands out of it. How did you find that process? How did you navigate something so completely new, being mindful of your role as a judge? How did you coalesce people? What was that experience like for you?
I think that honestly, one of the things that I've always done is I've always tried to be a people person. I've always tried to, my mother raised me a certain way, and I tell people all the time, my mother used to say in Spanish, Esther, tú no eres mejor que nadie, pero nadie es mejor que tú. Translation, Esther, you're not better than anyone, but no one is better than you. And so the idea of always treating people the way I wanted to be treated was critical in my development. And I think that I started first as a mama bear. I really felt I had to do something. I just couldn't sit back. I had to do something. But I also leaned back on things that I knew were necessary, which was to be patient, to try to be with people, not traveling alone. And I maybe, in some ways, I was always, and I think I still am, very willing to show vulnerability and very willing to ask for help, but just being me and being as authentic and as genuine as I could. And that was, I think, a big component. I didn't look at people in this process as R's or D's. I looked at people in this process as people that could help us and that needed to help us and that needed to make democracy paramount because it's in all of our best interest. And so when I talked to senators and when I made the phone calls, I often thought of Danny, and I often, and still do. If you know me and you meet me, you'll hear me talk about him. I mean, we needed to put a face to this. And we needed to talk about the dangers. I know that Judge Lefkow is here, and I am not the first judicial officer to have faced this, but Lord knows I would love to be the last. And I know I'm not, because we've seen Judge Wilkinson in Maryland, who lost his life outside his Maryland home by a disgruntled litigant while his wife and son waited for him to come home from dinner. I think of Judge Romer from Wisconsin, who sentenced the defendant 15 years earlier and was retired. And the guy waited to exact revenge, and killed the judge, zip-tied him to a chair and assassinated him. We've seen the near misses. We've seen, all of us have seen the Las Vegas, Nevada judge who had the gentleman leap over the bench with superhuman powers, it seemed like, to get at her. We got to be voyeurists for a moment to see the amount of anger that a litigant feels towards a judge and who is willing to jump over the bench to get her. So we are seeing an escalation of violence. We're seeing a loss of respect for humanity. What a dangerous combination, right? And I think that for us, all of us, we need to be mindful that this is not something that just happened to Mark and me. This is something that can happen to all of us in the form of losing our rights, losing the country we all love so much and that we have all benefited from. And that is what's at stake if we don't start protecting the men and women who proudly serve the United States of America and the states and U.S. territories. So this has got to be a hard press and a continued press.
Well, you took, again, sort of the utmost devastation, and while you shared that you initially felt angry and certainly were grieving, you have turned that into something so productive. And I know that a lot of people, and especially speaking to the students, it can be overwhelming in today's society when things are coming at you all the time and you feel helpless and you feel that you can't really make a difference. But sometimes you just have to start, right? One step at a time, and be willing to ask for help. I mean, you reached out for help and you probably got more help than you ever imagined. People wanted to help you, people within the judiciary from all levels, from all sectors, as you say, from different backgrounds. You inspired what I think ultimately is the good in most people, that they want to affect change in a positive way, but it took someone like you who was inspiring and motivating and honest and genuine to tap into that. And I know that we and Beth Bloom and so many others did anything and everything that we could.
You did.
To help you, but you led the way, and you did what many people never thought could happen. It happened at the last minute in December. Oh my God. We didn't know that it was ultimately going to get passed, but it did. So maybe speak a little bit about the bill and what it does and what your hopes are to go forward, including at the state level.
Right. Well, the Anderl Act, named after Daniel, is an act that passed on December 23rd, 2022. What a Christmas present. And it was signed by President Biden. And it does a number of things. I mean, it shields federal judges' personally identifiable information, what we call PII. It also has a mechanism for judges, if there are personal information out there in a private company, on a private website, we can seek help from the director of the Administrative Office of the Courts, and they can seek injunctive relief to get that information removed. It's created things like the Vulnerability Management Program, which is a program within the AO that's trying to do its part to partner with the marshals and monitor our information. It's increased the home intrusion detection systems for federal officers. It's done quite a bit. I mean, it's a great start. But here's what it doesn't do. There are 30,000 state and local judges that proudly serve these states and territories. And the Anderl Act does not cover state judges. And so if you are a federal judge sitting in a state that does not have a corresponding or complementing law, you're going to be vulnerable, because the minute that companies like Ironwall and Delete Me take your information down, that information is being repopulated on state agency websites. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, what about the state and local judges? And so we now began what I call a state-by-state initiative of trying to encourage states to enact their own laws that serve as belt and suspenders to the Anderl Act. New Jersey did it early, and it's working wonderfully. And some states, we have some recent states that have joined the cause, and I'm so proud to have been a small part in their endeavors, but Maryland, Wisconsin, Hawaii, I just testified in Michigan before the Senate. We're seeing New York City finally got its law, and so we're working to make sure that all the U.S. states and territories are covered. So there's certainly things that it does. The New Jersey law, Daniels Law, is open for prosecutors, law enforcement, and judges active and retired. The federal legislation is only geared at federal officers active and retired. So there's always room for improvement, but I think when it comes to judicial security, we cannot be comfortable. We cannot be complacent. We need to be proactive. The man who was targeting me, I never saw it coming. I mean, he appeared before me a few months earlier, and he was okay. I remember there was something disagreeable about him, but nothing that caused me any alarm. And I think that if we're waiting to criminalize the conduct after, that's defensive thinking. And although it's good, we need offensive work. We need to be proactive because you will not see it coming. Judge Wilkinson did not see it coming. Judge Romer did not see it coming. And many of the judges here today, I know, did not see it coming. So we have to make sure that we're smart about it. And so, the legislation, I'm so proud of it, but we have so much work to do. That's why I come and I'm obviously humbled and honored to have received this award after a man that when I read about him, I just was in awe, But I'm here too to speak to the students and to speak to everyone in attendance that this is an us thing. We have to climb this mountain together. We have to be motivated and passionate about it. And we have to remember that there's so much more at stake. So much more at stake than just the eye goals that we sometimes set for ourselves.
So what would be the takeaways that you'd want the law students sitting in the room to leave with today? I mean, they're being inundated with lots of substantive work in their various classes. They've got tests and exams, and they're very, very busy. And they're doing their writing and moot court. On top of all of that, what are some of those lessons that you think are fundamental to development as young adults and as future professionals in the legal field?
I think it's important to stay active in your community. I remember when I went to law school, I have my friend from college who's here, and you sometimes get in a bubble. And you sort of think I've got to get the A and I've got to get the job, and I sit in this bubble and this is where I'm at. And I'm not saying that's necessarily indicative for everyone in attendance, but you're on that climb and you're very focused. And you're sometimes not really looking at what else is going on, what else can I do, how else can I volunteer, how else can I be at least involved or vocal. And guess what? Talking to mom and dad about sort of the things that really matter and the concerns you have for your future and for your life, and sort of prompting your loved ones to sort of get involved and figure out what's going on in North Carolina with judicial security. I don't know if there's a corresponding law here, but if there isn't, there ought to be. And sort of where you're all from and your where you call home. What can we do? And I think that's always something that I ask students to think about. But you know what I really want people to think about? How we treat each other. I mean, there's just so much discord and so much vitriol, and there's just so much the way that we talk about each other. You're either with me or you're against me. You either see things the way I see it or you don't. And I think as future lawyers, we have to be very responsible for how we behave and how we navigate litigation with our clients. Because you'll always find a client that's ready to blame the judge for everything, right? And you're going to always find a client that's ready to argue that it's her fault or it's his fault that, this case is the way it is. And as a lawyer, you need to remember the merits. You need to bring it down to the merits, and you need to take sort of ownership and stock of how are you projecting yourself onto the world. Because it starts in that first place that before you can make that first step, it starts with you. And so I found that, I've just been a lot more careful how I word things. Everybody who had lunch with me today knows that I've been talking about books, but I read a book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And his four agreements are be impeccable with your word. It's the first thing, be impeccable with your word. How are you speaking to one another and to yourself in your head, right? 2, don't take things personal. Sometimes it's not personal. Sometimes people do things and, it's just what happened. It was their day. They were having a bad day. It doesn't mean they don't like you. That you're against me. It doesn't mean you're my enemy, right? 3rd agreement, don't assume. A lot of people make assumptions all the time. They take a look at you and they make an assumption about you. They think they know who you are. And we walk around with these assumptions that are often judgmental. And, we need to take a step back and allow life to unfold and the person and your connection to that person to unfold before you make up your mind about that person. And finally, do the best that you can. Do the best that you can with whatever you're doing at a given moment. And if it's for the more seasoned folks in the room, if you go home after a hard day of work and it's time to be with the family, be with the family. Don't be on your phone, in a minute, dear, or not now, right? Be present, be with your families. Be the best dad or mom you can possibly be at the moment. If you're a student and you're, in class, try to be the best student that you possibly can be. Or best intern. But how about the best sibling, the best friend that you can be at the given moment? It's a challenge for you. We're not always going to be the same. We're all different. We all have good days and bad days. But man, if you tried your best, who can fault that? So for me, it's those little things that if I said anything to the students and I wanted them to take it away, I'd ask them to take those agreements and think about those agreements and think about who they want to be and what mountain do you want to be on. And David Brooks says that there are people that manage to climb that second mountain the first time. It wasn't me. I definitely climbed a first mountain. I definitely did. But I'm on the second, and it's pretty good. It's a good climb.
Well, there's so much there, Esther. We can't pack it all in this short amount of time. I did want to give a strong endorsement of Duke Law's willingness last year for the first time and now in a week and a half for the second time. All first-year law students, so all 250 plus, go through a civil discourse and difficult decisions program that Judge Beth Bloom from my district, Southern District of Florida, and I worked awfully hard many, many years ago, hoping that it would be a program that was short-lived, that it wasn't needed over the course of the last 8 years or so, but it continues to be, and it harps on exactly the principles, Esther, that you've just concluded with, which are, for those students and really adults in the audience as well, the importance of how we treat each other, how we respect one another, even if we disagree, how we speak with one another, how we take the time, which is really the subject of David Brooks' second book, How We Get to Know Each Other. It really kind of takes time to understand who somebody is and where they may be coming from and how they may have had a bad day. And maybe that's why they acted out the way they did. And, ultimately, I think he views, and I certainly share this view, and I think you do as well, that most all of us share at least one or two, if not more, things in common. And when you can find that common ground, it makes it a lot easier to get along. Even if you disagree on the big issues, that's fine, that's fair. But you don't have to lose respect and civility with one another. So why don't we take a moment, so I haven't stolen all of the questions and hogged you. Is there anyone who has any questions for Judge Salas? I'm sure she'd be willing to answer anything just about her professional career or anything more about her experience in passing the Daniel Anderl Judicial Act.
I had breakfast with some of the law students today. Henry's here. I'm not seeing any of the other folks, my poor victims this morning, but I am not, shy. I will call on you. Only kidding. I'm only kidding. Henry's like, I'm the only one she knows the name. She knows my name now. But yeah, I mean, Robin, one of the things, I'm like into reading all these books. My poor husband knows that I'm like, I keep saying, I got to buy David Brooks' his other book. But I have 14 to go at home, right? So I told him I wasn't going to buy any more books, but the universe brought the book to me by Peter. Thank you so much. But one of the books I read, it said, in life, we have, you can choose to be right or kind. And when you're faced with that choice, choose kindness. Choose kindness. You don't always have to have the last word. You don't always have to show them that they were wrong, and kindness goes so long. I tell you, I've had opportunities where I really have seen it. Somebody want to just show me they were right, and it was a recent event that I was at, and this individual was intent on showing me that they were just the smartest person, and I felt bad for a moment because her and I lost an opportunity to connect on a real deeper level and maybe make a friend. And it wasn't possible. I send her love, but obviously, that's not someone that, and then I've had instances where somebody was really just kind and I was wrong, but they looked past it and they wanted that moment with me, and we're friends forever. So I think that we have these choices that we can all make, and you're making them all now. And there's just such critical moments in your life. But I know that I will never be the same. I mean, Beth Bloom and Robin Rosenberg, we are attached forever, right? We met at a conference. You came up to me and gave me this hug, and Beth as well, and then we were on this journey together, the highs and the lows and everything, and you guys just stayed right there with me. And to me, that's like, when you say, what's your life, what's your legacy? This is my legacy. The people and the friends that I've made that I'll have forever. And I just think, that's the sign of a life well lived. Is a life surrounded by people that you love and love you too. It's just such a good feeling. I prefer that feeling over anything else.
For sure.
Well,
just to conclude, because the ongoing...
Is there a question?
Question? Yes.
I just had a question. So often you hear how the grief journey is a deeply personal one. And so I would love to hear how you balance your own personal grief journey with fighting for the safety of the judiciary. You mentioned how your light was flickering that first Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So how do you sustain your life, your personal life, amidst this huge fight?
What's your name?
Addison.
Addison?
Mm-hmm.
Nice to meet you, Addison.
Thank you.
I'm an open book. So, I know everybody varies in terms of the level of comfort. I've sort of opened a vulnerability sort of chamber, and I'm really comfortable talking about my grief. When Daniel was first murdered, Mark was still, struggling. I remember coming across a course, and I think it was the University of Michigan. I got to find it again. But it was a lecture on grief. And at first, I'm so glad I stuck with it. And I'm going to make a joke about some of the professors that I had. I was like, thank God I learned how to sit through some of the tough teachers that I've had in my lifetime. Only kidding. I just kid. But I stuck with it, And then she really started getting into the nitty-gritty about grief. And she said that she's done this entire survey on what has been most helpful during that bereavement period. And the top 3 things, I'm going to give them to you now. The top 3 things that I was doing, and I didn't even realize, Addison, I was doing it. First, you surround yourself with people you love and that love you, and you accept their help. A lot of us are type A, but you have to accept the help. That's number one in getting over, getting up that mountain, right? Number two, you tell your story, all right? And for us that have anyone who's lost a loved one, sometimes we're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid people don't want to hear it again. And you have to tell your story. I did it in a very public way on YouTube, right? But people who are home that are missing their loved ones, they need to talk about them. And the people that they love need to listen, even if they've heard it 100 times, you need to hear it again, okay? That's the kindness, right? And then the thing that she said, find meaningful purpose. And I was doing it. I mean, obviously I looked at the course, but I was doing it. I was finding the purpose, which was, I need to make sure my brothers and sisters on the bench are okay. And so I found that this journey gave me purpose. And the journey continues to give me purpose, along with criminal justice reform and, I think interest in humanity, that's a topic for me as well. So I just think, Edison, that it's about a personal thing. You have to know what you're comfortable with. Me, I'm Latina, I'm all out there. And I don't mind it so much. But thank you for your question. Great question.
Any other questions? Peter.
Judge, I'd be interested in knowing if this experience has changed how you approached your job as a federal judge.
I know Josephine's here. I don't see her right now, but I met with her. Yeah, there, Josephine's in the back. Josephine sits here in Durham, and she asked me that same question, Peter. It's made me a better judge. I always tell, I talk about my life in two hemispheres, pre-murder, post-murder. But I honestly, I know that I was a good person before Daniel's murder. Wouldn't I raise my angel, and been so lucky to be with Mark as long as I am and the life that I have. But I think post, my brother says it great. He says, Esther, you're the same. You're the same. The only thing is you're honing, the empathy and the compassion and those things that always made you Esther. But now it's like you're working on it, you're honing it. And I honestly am a better judge. I know I'm a better judge. But I know I'm a better wife. And I know I'm a better friend. And I know I'm just a happier person. I'm much more at peace. And I'm much more, I'm comfortable in my own skin. And I can't say I was always comfortable in my own skin. I am now. And I think a lot has to do with transformation. And a lot has to do, they say that with great suffering, you can either transmit it or transform it. And I feel it's been transformed within me. So I hope the bar feels the same way I feel about being a better judge. But, we'll see when the surveys come out.
No, they don't survey us in federal court. That's just in state court. We're good.
Anyone else?
Any other questions or comments? Well, please join me in giving a round of applause for this amazing, inspiring woman.
I love you.
Thank you.
You stuck with me.
Yeah, it was wonderful.